feeling overwhelmed. Psalm 3, your divine shield prayer against enemies, reclaim your peace. Do you ever feel like the weight of the world is pressing down on you, suffocating every breath and stealing every ounce of peace you once had? Like no matter where you turn, there's another obstacle, another problem, and you're left wondering, how much more can I take? It's a feeling so many of us know well. Stress from work drains your spirit. Financial burdens eat away at your confidence. Conflicts at home or with loved ones make you question your worth. And amidst all this chaos, fear hovers in the back of your mind, whispering doubts into your soul. You're not enough. You're about to fail. You're utterly alone. But what if I told you there's a way to reclaim peace, an unshakable, divine peace that shields you against all of life's storms? What if there's a promise that God Himself stands as your defender, lifting your head even when the world tries to bury you in despair? Psalm 3 is that promise. It's a cry from the heart of King David, a man who knew betrayal, fear, and loss firsthand. Yet within this ancient scripture lies a lifeline, words that still resonate today, offering hope, guidance, and resilience for anyone who feels surrounded by life's battles. Stay with me as we dive into this transformational psalm, unpacking its powerful message of divine protection and discovering how it can shield your heart. Calm your mind and ignite your faith in the face of overwhelming challenges. Emotional and contextual grounding, the struggles of King David. To fully grasp the transformative power of Psalm 3, we need to step into the harrowing reality King David faced when he penned these words. David, the same man who once defeated Goliath with nothing more than a slingshot and unwavering faith, now finds himself fleeing for his life not from an outside invader or a foreign army, but from his own flesh and blood. His son, Absalom, has risen in rebellion, tearing apart not just David's kingdom but the very bonds of family. Imagine the immense emotional burden of knowing that your own child seeks your downfall, leading a revolt that forces you to abandon your throne, your home, and the life you built. In that moment, David wasn't just a king under attack. He was a father betrayed. The pain of betrayal, especially from those closest to us, cuts deeper than any sword. David wasn't fleeing a mere political dispute. He was running under the crushing weight of heartbreak, shame, and fear. The people who once praised him now questioned his leadership. Soldiers and allies he trusted had joined the rebellion. Around every corner was the reminder that his world was unraveling, and there was nothing left to hold on to but his faith. David could have easily let despair consume him. He could have believed that his failures as a king, a father, and a leader were final, that God had abandoned him. And truthfully, how often do we feel that way in the face of life's own betrayals? When stress piles up, when people fail us, when we feel surrounded by negativity or opposition, don't we hear that same whisper in the back of our minds? This is it. You've gone too far. You're not enough. Even God can't help you now. But David, despite fleeing from his enemies, refused to flee from God instead. He lifts his voice in prayer and writes words that defy the weight of his circumstances. In Psalm 3:2-3, he declares, "But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the one who lifts my head." These words are not coming from a man sitting on a throne of victory, but from one huddled in the wilderness, surrounded by threats. And yet, David chooses faith over fear. He acknowledges his helplessness in the natural world, but proclaims God's ultimate power in the spiritual realm. David's struggles extend far beyond the political or physical. They resonate on a deeply emotional and spiritual level that remains timeless. His experience is our experience because all of us, at one point or another, walk through seasons of betrayal, fear, and doubt. The battles David faced weren't just external, they were battles of the soul. Would he allow fear and bitterness to rule him, or would he turn to God in trust? Would his circumstances dictate his mindset, or would he cling to the unchanging truth of God's promises? These aren't questions exclusive to an ancient king, they are the same decisions we face daily in our own lives. Think about your own challenges for a moment. Maybe you feel like David, overwhelmed by forces beyond your control, cut down by betrayal, or paralyzed by anxiety. Perhaps it's not an invading army surrounding you, but thoughts of self-doubt, stress from work, or conflict in a relationship. You might not be fleeing into the wilderness, but in your heart, you're retreating, feeling the walls close in as the lies take hold. You're not good enough. You'll fail. You're alone in this. But Psalm 3 offers more than just David's cry for help. It offers a roadmap for anyone who's felt outnumbered by life. It's a living reminder that God is not distant or indifferent. His promise to be a shield around us, to lift our heads even when everything within us feels like giving up, is a declaration of divine presence in the middle of our pain. David's faith was not conditioned on the absence of struggle, but on the certainty that God was greater than the struggle itself. Now, imagine what that kind of trust could look like in your own life. Think of the fears that are crowding your mind, the uncertainties that leave you restless. What would change if you believed, as David did, that God was your shield, that his protection wasn't just around you in a vague sense, but completely surrounding you, impenetrable and steadfast? What if, in the moments when shame made you bow your head in defeat, you could feel the Lord lifting it, restoring your dignity and reminding you of who you truly are in him? The power of Psalm 3 lies in its honesty and raw connection to our own struggles. David doesn't pretend everything is fine. He acknowledges his fears, but he gives them over to God. He declares God's presence even when others mock him, saying there is no help for him in God. David's willingness to trust, to cry out, even as the world seemed to crumble, is what makes this psalm so profound. It's not about escaping the battle, it's about knowing who fights for you in the midst of it. When life feels overwhelming, when you feel like everything and everyone is against you, will you let fear take the final word, or will you look to God as your shield? David's story reminds us that peace isn't found in the absence of enemies, but in the presence of God, who stands beside us no matter the odds. The divine shield unpacks Psalm 3-3, line by line. When life feels like a battlefield, filled with chaos and unrelenting challenges, the words of Psalm 3:3 become a lifeline. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head. These are not just poetic expressions, but profound truths that carry deep spiritual significance. Let's unpack each phrase and uncover its timeless relevance for your life, especially in moments when it feels like the world is against you. First, let's look at the phrase, "You, O Lord, are a shield about me." The image of a shield in ancient times was one of strength, defense, and protection. For an Israelite warrior, a shield was often their first line of defense in battle, absorbing the blows intended to wound or destroy. But there's something remarkable about the shield David refers to here. This shield isn't just something held in front of him. It's a shield that surrounds him completely, one that protects him from every side, front, back, above, and beneath. It's not just a tool of defense. It's a divine fortress, impenetrable against any attack. Think about the power of that image when you apply it to your own life. Sometimes the attacks against us feel relentless, don't they? Fear, negativity, rejection, and surprise challenges strike us from all angles, often faster than we can cope. But David reminds us here that God's shield isn't limited. He's not just a defense for one part of you. His protection envelops you entirely. No matter where the attack comes from, his shield is there. And this isn't just about physical safety. It's about guarding your heart, your mind, and your spirit from breaking under the weight of it all. God's shield doesn't remove the battle, but it ensures that the battle won't break you. Next, David describes the Lord as my glory. At first glance, this phrase might seem abstract, but its meaning is powerful and transformational. In this moment, David had every reason to feel stripped of his glory. As a king, his throne was taken. As a father, he was betrayed. As a man, his reputation faced public ridicule. Yet, even as the world sought to humiliate him and tear down everything he had built, David declares that his glory isn't tied to his accomplishments, titles, or wealth. His glory is rooted in the Lord, alone and changing, eternal, and untouched by earthly circumstances. So much of our modern stress comes from chasing glory in the wrong places. We tie our worth to achievements, income, or how others perceive us. And when those things falter, as they inevitably will, we feel as though we've lost everything. But David's words remind us of the freedom that comes from placing our identity in God. When He is your glory, no failure, loss, or betrayal can diminish your worth. You belong to Him, and that is where your value lies. Finally, we come to the last line, the lifter of my head. Picture David in this moment. He's fled his kingdom. He's surrounded by naysayers who mock his faith, crying out, there is no salvation for him in God. It would make sense for David to hang his head in shame, utterly defeated. But instead, he speaks of God as the one who lifts his head. This isn't an image of pride or defiance. It's one of dignity and restoration. When God lifts your head, He reminds you of who you truly are, not defined by your failures or the cruelty of others, but by His profound love and purpose for your life. Perhaps you've had moments when you felt like hanging your head in despair. The weight of shame, mistakes, or rejection can make us feel unworthy to even look up. But David's words here reveal a deeper truth. God doesn't leave you in that posture of defeat. He reaches down, lifts your head, and restores your confidence not in a superficial way, but in a way that reminds you of your eternal identity as His beloved child. David's declaration in this verse offers three critical promises: protection, identity, and restoration. These aren't abstract theological ideas. They are practical truths that apply directly to your life. When you feel attacked, overwhelmed, or as though life is caving in on you, these promises become your spiritual anchors. God shields you from what the world throws at you. He restores your sense of worth and dignity, and He lifts you out of shame and fear, offering hope and purpose even during your darkest hours. This is what makes Psalm 3 so powerful. It's not a psalm of denial. It acknowledges fear, betrayal, and the reality of pain. But it doesn't stop there. Instead, it turns to the unchanging nature of God, pointing to His ability to shield, uplift, and restore no matter what happens. And these truths aren't just for David. They're for you, right now, regardless of where you find yourself. God promises His protection, His unwavering presence, and His healing touch. What would change in your life if you fully embraced the meaning of Psalm 3:2-3? How would your perspective shift if you believed, deep in your heart, that God is actively shielding you, defining your worth, and lifting you above your circumstances? It starts with a simple decision to trust in His promises, to rest in His defense, and to allow His truth to shape the way you see yourself and the world around you. The battle may rage on, but with God as your shield, your glory, and the lifter of your head, you can stand firm, knowing that nothing, not fear, anxiety, or even betrayal, has the power to defeat you. The science of peace, how faith impacts your mind and emotions. What does it mean to feel peace in the middle of chaos? How do you hold on to faith when your emotions are screaming for you to panic? Psalm 3 offers a spiritual solution to the storms in our lives. But what's fascinating is how modern science aligns with these ancient truths. Faith isn't just a spiritual tool. It has profound effects on your emotional and mental well-being, creating balance and resilience even in overwhelming situations. Let's consider David's mindset when he wrote this psalm. He was surrounded by enemies, facing the collapse of his family, his kingdom, and even his closest relationships. Yet, despite the chaos, he clung to faith, declaring God's shield of protection over his life. Modern psychology suggests that faith, just like David's, has a profound physiological impact on the brain and body. Studies have shown that turning to prayer, meditation, or scripture during times of stress can significantly reduce the production of cortisol, often called the stress hormone. When you encounter challenges, the natural response of your body is to release cortisol, which triggers a fight-or-flight reaction and heightens feelings of fear and anxiety. While useful in moments of immediate physical danger, long-term exposure to high cortisol levels can wreak havoc on your mental and emotional health. However, when you turn your thoughts to God, praying as David did, reflecting on scripture, or practicing gratitude, shift the focus of your brain from fear to trust. This process engages the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain that allows for calm reflection. At the same time, it reduces activity in the amygdala, the area responsible for processing fear. By choosing faith over panic, you begin to regulate your emotions, breaking the cycle of stress and replacing it with a sense of divine stability. The impact doesn't stop at stress reduction. Faith and prayer have also been shown to stimulate the release of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine chemicals in the brain that elevate mood and foster feelings of happiness and stability. Often, these chemicals are seen as the building blocks of emotional balance. When you pray or meditate on a psalm like Psalm 3, visualizing God as your shield and your restorer, it's not just a spiritual exercise. Your body interprets these practices as signals for healing and calm, reinforcing a natural sense of peace that can anchor you when the storms of life feel insurmountable. David's assurance that God is a shield about me is not just a hopeful declaration, it's a mental reframe. In the human brain, fear and trust can't dominate at the same time. When you actively engage in trust, whether through prayer, affirmation, or a moment of silent connection with God, you're choosing to weaken fear's grip on your emotions. David could have focused entirely on the enemies surrounding him, the betrayal of his son, and the loss of control. But instead, he replaced those fearful thoughts with declarations of trust and protection, reshaping his internal narrative even in the darkest of times. One of the most intriguing parallels between faith and modern science lies in the practice of gratitude. David didn't just cry out for help in Psalm 3. He acknowledged God's protection and glorified Him even before he saw the outcome of the battle. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's wrong to what's right. And science agrees practicing gratitude rewires the brain, increasing feelings of contentment and peace. It's like a reset button for your mind, reminding you of what remains steady when everything else feels like it's falling apart. Another key factor is mindfulness, which can be seen in how David interacts with his emotions in Psalm 3. Mindfulness in today's context means acknowledging your thoughts and emotions without being consumed by them. David does exactly this. He doesn't deny his fear or the threats against him. Instead, he names them clearly, bringing them into the presence of God. O Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Many are rising up against me. By voicing the reality of his situation, David isn't pretending that everything is fine. But he also doesn't let fear have the final word instead. He follows it with declarations of God's protection and faithfulness. This approach is deeply practical, even for our lives today. When stress and fear come rushing in, you can turn to Psalm 3 as a guide. Acknowledge what's troubling you, name it, as David did, but then take it one step further. Shift into a prayer or meditation that reaffirms God's presence with you. See him as your shield, just as David described. Picture yourself surrounded by divine protection, encased in his peace. Let that image take hold in your mind, calming your thoughts and influencing your emotions. What this leads to is more than just temporary relief. It creates resilience. Each time you shift from fear to trust, you're training your brain to handle stress in a healthier way. You're building the spiritual and emotional muscles you need to stand strong when life's challenges come your way. Faith, in this sense, is not passive, it's active. It's a practice that strengthens you over time, not just spiritually, but neurologically. This science-backed perspective on faith is a modern reminder of what David instinctively understood thousands of years ago. The struggles might look different, now financial worries, health battles, family conflict, but the solution remains the same. Trust God as your shield. Speak his promises over your circumstances. Bring your worries to him and allow your mind and soul to experience the peace that only his presence can provide. What makes Psalm 3 so extraordinary is not just the promise of protection, but how that promise transforms the way we think, how our minds and bodies respond to stress, and ultimately, how we live. Today, you can take the same step David took. Don't let fear control your next moment. Choose trust, because when you do, you allow peace, the kind that surpasses all understanding, to guard your heart and mind. Spiritual guided prayer, praying Psalm 3 over your life. Close your eyes for a moment and listen to these words as though they were written just for you. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. Let those words sink in. Imagine them wrapping around you, settling into the deepest parts of your heart. This is not just poetry born from desperation. It's a promise, a divine assurance that has the power to quiet every fear and restore every broken place within you. In this chapter, we're going to pray Psalm 3 together. Don't just recite it, but truly bring it to life in your heart and mind. If you're feeling surrounded by anxiety, doubt, or relentless challenges, I want you to picture these struggles as your enemies. Maybe it's stress from work or school. Maybe it's a relationship that feels broken beyond repair. Maybe it's the voice inside your own head that keeps telling you you're not enough. Whatever it is, imagine these troubles encircling you. They're pressing in, making you feel small, weak, and unsure of what to do next. Now, in this moment, I invite you to bring God into the picture. He is your shield. He doesn't come just to defend you from the front, but to completely surround you, cutting off every angle of attack. Think of him encasing you in his strength, his peace, and his presence. This is the promise of Psalm 3. Together, let's turn this psalm into a prayer you can carry with you into any battle you face. Start by repeating these words aloud, slowly, letting them settle into your spirit. Lord, how many enemies rise against me? Many are saying, God will not deliver him. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head. I cry aloud to you, Lord, and you answer me from your holy mountain. As you speak those words, feel the weight of your struggles shifting. Picture yourself handing each worry, each fear, over to God. Say them silently to Him as you pray. Maybe it's the pressure to succeed, the fear of failure, or the ache of rejection. Give these burdens to Him. Let Him take them. Now, I want you to picture something powerful. Imagine yourself standing surrounded on every side by those lies, those fears, those doubts. But then, see the Lord Himself step in. One by one, He shields you. He blocks every attack. He silences every voice that speaks against you. And in this instant, there's a profound realization. No matter how many troubles rise against you, none of them can get past the shield of God. As we continue, let's speak the next part together. Keeping the picture of God's protection at the center of your mind, I lay down and sleep. I wake again because the Lord sustains me. I will not fear, though tens of thousands assail me on every side. Imagine how much trust it takes to lay your head down in the middle of a battle, knowing that God Himself is awake and watching over you. When David wrote these words, he wasn't sitting in a palace, comfortable and secure. He was in a dangerous wilderness, surrounded by enemies. Yet he found peace that allowed him to rest. Think of the battles in your own life that keep you up at night, the worries that race through your mind, the fears that weigh heavy on your chest when everything goes quiet. Now imagine placing all those burdens in God's hands, and in return, receiving the gift of rest, not just physical, but deep, soul-level peace. Let's pray this truth into your life now. Lord, You sustain me. Even when I feel weak, You lift me up. When the world seems intent on my destruction, You are steady and present. Teach me to release my fear, to rest in Your care, to trust in Your purpose for my life. As you say these words, picture the Lord lifting your head as David described. See Him restoring your confidence, reminding you that you are not defined by the lies or doubts of the world. You are defined by Him, your Creator, your Protector, your Savior. Now we move to the final lines of the psalm. Arise, Lord, deliver me, my God. Strike all my enemies on the jaw. Break the teeth of the wicked. From the Lord comes deliverance. May Your blessing be on Your people. This is not just a plea for rescue. It's a declaration of victory. David wasn't asking for a battle plan or earthly reinforcements. He was proclaiming that the battle had already been won through God. Think of the battles in your life that seem impossible to win, the situations that feel overwhelming or irreversible. This part of the prayer is your reminder that God's deliverance doesn't depend on your strength, your resources, or your ability to figure it out. It depends only on Him. As we finish, take a deep breath. Feel the stillness, the quiet after declaring these truths over your life. Psalm 3 is not just an ancient prayer, it's a weapon that equips you to fight the battles in your mind, your heart, and your soul. Use it to remind yourself of God's presence, His power, and His protection every single day. Anytime you feel overwhelmed, return to these words. Speak them, pray them, and let them carry you back to the truth. God is your shield, your glory, and the lifter of your head. Overcoming negative narratives, a new mindset for challenges. When we're overwhelmed by life, it's not just the external battles we face. Often, it's the silent war happening within us that feels the most impossible to overcome. Our minds become battlegrounds for intrusive thoughts of fear, negativity, and hopelessness. Psalm 3 speaks directly to that struggle, showing us how faith rewrites the narrative we tell ourselves, replacing fear-driven cycles with a divine truth that restores hope and resilience. Think about the narrative David could have adopted while writing Psalm 3. He was fleeing from his own son, abandoned by many who once supported him, and mocked openly by his enemies. Some went so far as to declare, "God will not deliver him." Those words alone, when repeated enough by others, could have infiltrated his own heart, convincing him of their so-called truth. It would have been so easy for David to internalize that narrative, to believe that his situation was beyond redemption. Isn't that often the case with us? When we're surrounded by noise, criticism, or even our inner doubts, we begin to replay those thoughts until they become fixed beliefs. You can't handle this. You're not strong enough. God isn't listening to you. That's the power of negative narratives. They grow louder the more we feed them. And in moments of vulnerability and overwhelm, they grip us faster than ever. But David shows us an alternative. Instead of letting himself spiral into despair or self-pity, he chooses a conscious, deliberate reframing of his story. He acknowledges the reality of his enemies, their increasing numbers, and what they're saying about him. But he doesn't stop there. David validates the circumstances, but denies them the final word. His response is simple, yet revolutionary. "But you, O Lord, are a shield about me." That "but" changes everything. It shifts the focus from his enemies to his God, from the problem to the promise. And that is the key to overcoming negative narratives in your own life. It's not about denying the struggle or pretending everything is fine. It's about actively challenging and replacing distorted, fear-driven thoughts with truths anchored in God's promises. Now, think about the stories you've been telling yourself in the midst of your struggles. How many of them start with fear? "I'm not good enough to fix this. This situation will never get better. People will always let me down." These thoughts, though they feel true in the moment, are still distortions of the greater reality. Negative narratives thrive when we focus solely on our own limits and the overwhelming weight of our circumstances. But to overcome them, you must model David's mindset, turning your thoughts upward toward the one who has no limits. This isn't easy. Breaking negative thought patterns requires intentional practice, but it starts with recognizing them. Begin by identifying the lies you've been believing. Write them down if you need to, so you can see them clearly. Then, like David, speak a "but" over them. For example, "I feel like I've failed, but you, O Lord, see my worth and call me your child. This feels too big for me to handle, but you, O Lord, are my strength and shield." By simply reframing the narrative, you bring God into the center of the story, where he belongs. His truth begins to rewrite every false belief you've been clinging to. This principle is even supported by modern psychology. What we meditate on, whether positive or negative, begins to shape the pathways in our brain. When we focus on fear, shame, or inadequacy, we strengthen neural connections that reinforce those emotions and make it harder to break free. But when we meditate on truth, especially the truth of God's Word, we redirect those pathways, creating room for peace, resilience, and hope to grow. David wasn't just repeating words for comfort. He was rewiring his mindset by speaking God's promises over his fears. You can do the same by using Psalm 3 as your guide. Start by imagining the scenes in your own life where you felt overwhelmed or defeated. Picture those moments clearly, not to stay stuck in the pain, but to address them head-on. Maybe it's a time you received bad news, faced an unexpected setback, or felt crushed by someone's misunderstanding or betrayal. Whatever the event, think about the thoughts that ran through your mind in that moment. Those narratives might have sounded something like, "I can't recover from this," or "No one cares what I'm going through." Now take that moment, that thought, and apply Psalm 3:3 to it. Speak these words, "But you, O Lord, are a shield about me." Picture God stepping into that scene not as a distant figure watching from afar, but as a warrior beside you, shielding you from every attack and deflecting every doubt. Imagine his hand gently lifting your chin as he reminds you of your true identity. He has never abandoned you. He defends you, and he restores your confidence when you feel like you don't have the strength to face the day. This is how you rewrite your narrative. It's not about ignoring the voices of fear, but about drowning them out with words of truth. David could have fallen into despair, but he fought back with declarations that defined his reality through faith, not fear. The same is available to you. This practice of reframing negative narratives is not just a one-time event, it's a discipline. Each day, as new challenges arise and new doubts creep in, you have to pause, acknowledge the fear, and consciously bring God into the story. Speak his promises out loud if you must, just as David did. In time, you'll notice that the pattern begins to change. Where you once saw hopelessness, you'll begin to sense God's shield. Where you once felt shame, you'll feel your head being lifted. And where you once let fear take the final word, you'll hear the steady reassurance that God is with you. Your circumstances might not change overnight, but your perspective will. And often, that shift in perspective, the ability to see your struggles through the lens of God's truth, rather than the lies of fears, the real victory. David's story shows us that while we can't always avoid the battles, we can choose how we fight them. And when we choose to fight with faith, letting God rewrite the narrative, we step into the victory that has been ours all along. Faith and resilience, Psalm 3, a call to spiritual courage. Faith is not passive. It's a call to action, to resilience, and to courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Psalm 3 is more than a cry for help. It's a declaration of readiness to face life's battles with confidence, knowing that victory comes not from human effort, but through God's unwavering presence and power. David's journey, as captured in this psalm, teaches us that true resilience is rooted in faith, and spiritual courage emerges when we trust in something greater than our circumstances. Picture David's situation once more. He is on the run, hunted by his own son, surrounded by those who mock his faith and declare that there is no hope for him in God. The weight of betrayal, combined with the physical danger he faced, would have been enough to crush anyone. But David doesn't collapse under the pressure. Instead, he makes the radical decision to hold onto his faith. This is spiritual courage in its purest form, choosing to cling to God even when every external sign points to hopelessness. He doesn't wait for the situation to improve before proclaiming God's protection. He speaks it into existence in the midst of the storm. Resilience is often misunderstood as simply pushing through, but David shows us that resilience is much deeper than that. It's not about ignoring fear, pain, or exhaustion. Resilience begins by acknowledging those feelings and then handing them over to God. David doesn't pretend that he isn't afraid or overwhelmed. In fact, his honesty is what makes Psalm 3 so powerful. O Lord, how many are my foes? How many rise up against me? He confronts the harsh reality of his situation head-on, but then he refuses to stop there. His faith moves him forward. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me. That but transforms his focus. Where fear once dominated, faith now takes its place. This is the essence of spiritual courage. It's not the absence of fear, but the ability to trust God despite your fear. Courage isn't found in pretending the battle isn't real. It's found in believing that God's protection is greater than any battle you face. David's resilience wasn't born out of his own ability to endure, but out of his faith that God would sustain him even when the odds were against him. He didn't allow his circumstances to dictate his perspective. Instead, he let his trust in God shape how he viewed his circumstances. For many of us, the battles we face aren't external enemies, but internal struggles: fear, doubt, anxiety, and the seemingly unshakable weight of unmet expectations. These battles test our resilience in ways that physical challenges never could. But the principle remains the same. Psalm 3 calls us to stand firm, not in our own strength, but in the assurance that God is our shield. It's an invitation to stop carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders and to surrender that burden to Him. True. Courage requires a shift in perspective. When fear takes hold, it narrows our focus. It tricks us into believing that the problem in front of us is the only thing that matters and that there's no way out. But faith widens our view. It reminds us that there is a greater reality beyond what we can see. When David speaks of God as a shield, he's not saying that the threat has disappeared. The threat is still there, but it no longer has the power to dominate his heart. Faith shifts the narrative, replacing despair with hope and helplessness with resilience. This shift in perspective is where resilience begins to grow. When you know that God is your protector, you stop looking at challenges as insurmountable barriers. Instead, they become opportunities to step into deeper trust. The fight is no longer just about survival. It's about walking in faith even when the outcome is uncertain. David's declaration, "I will not fear though tens of thousands assail me on every side," is not an act of denial. It's a bold proclamation of trust that spills over into courage. Imagine standing in that kind of assurance, where the presence of God outweighs the power of any challenge. In our own lives, resilience can be cultivated through this same mindset of trust and surrender. When challenges arise, the natural response may be to fall into patterns of fear or control. But Psalm 3 teaches us to approach challenges differently. It begins with a simple but profound decision: to acknowledge the reality of the struggle while shifting the focus to God's promises. This isn't a one-time choice, it's a discipline. Resilience grows with every step of faith you take. Another layer of resilience comes through rest. Psalm 3-5 says, "I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me." Think about this for a moment. In a circumstance where most people would stay awake in panic, David finds rest. Courage doesn't always come through action. Sometimes it comes through surrender, through allowing God to take over what you can't control. Rest is an act of faith, a declaration that you trust God enough to let go, even for a moment. David's ability to sleep in the face of danger is a testament to his unshakable trust in God's protection and provision. Faith and resilience go hand in hand, constantly feeding and strengthening one another. The more you trust in God, the more resilient you become. And the more resilient you are, the stronger your faith grows. Each time David declared God's protection, his trust deepened, and his ability to face adversity with courage expanded. This same growth is available to you. Spiritual courage isn't something you're born with. It's something you develop every time you make the choice to trust God in the midst of the storm. What would change in your life if you embraced this kind of resilience? How might your outlook shift if, instead of dwelling on the challenge, you reminded yourself that God is your shield, your glory, and the lifter of your head? Faith doesn't eliminate the challenges, but it empowers you to face them with strength that isn't your own. Psalm 3 invites you to take that step, to redefine resilience as courageous faith in God, no matter what battles surround you. Gratitude as your weapon, the power of thankfulness. In moments of overwhelming struggle, gratitude might feel like the furthest thing from your mind. When you're faced with betrayal, fear, or uncertainty, how can you possibly find the strength to be thankful? Yet, Psalm 3 teaches us an extraordinary truth. Gratitude is not only a response, it's a weapon. It's a discipline that shifts your focus from what's wrong to what's right, from fear to faith, and from hopelessness to divine assurance. David didn't write Psalm 3 after his battle was over. He didn't wait for resolution or victory to find a reason to thank God. Instead, he wrote it in the thick of the struggle, while his life was still in jeopardy and the outcome remained uncertain. This is what makes the gratitude in Psalm 3 so transformative. David wasn't thanking God for a battle-free life. He was thanking God for his presence, his protection, and his promises. Even as the battle raged on, gratitude became his weapon, a defiant act against fear and despair. In verse 3, David declares, "But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory, and the lifter of my head." This is not just poetic language, it's an act of thankfulness. Instead of dwelling on his challenges, David shifts his thoughts toward the faithfulness of God. He thanks God for being his shield, even before the attack is over. He thanks God for lifting his head, even while shame and doubt threaten to pull him down. Gratitude is often misunderstood as passive acceptance, but in reality, it is an active choice to focus on God's faithfulness rather than the weight of your situation. This same practice can transform your perspective in the midst of your own battles. Gratitude is not about pretending your struggles don't exist. It's about remembering that they are not the whole story. The act of thanking God brings your heart and mind back to what is constant and unchanging: His character, His promises, and His unfailing love. When you make gratitude a part of your spiritual practice, it becomes one of the most powerful tools to deepen your faith and build resilience. Science, too, has begun to unveil the power of gratitude. Research shows that practicing gratitude rewires your brain, enhancing your emotional well-being and helping you process stress more effectively. When you express thankfulness, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin, two powerful neurotransmitters that improve mood and counteract feelings of sadness or anxiety. Gratitude literally changes the way your brain operates, reinforcing positive thought patterns while diminishing the influence of fear and negativity. David's decision to express gratitude in Psalm 3 wasn't just an act of faith, it was also a proven method of emotional and spiritual renewal. Why is gratitude so powerful, even in the hardest moments? Because it forces you to focus on what remains, not on what has been lost. Think about David's situation. His kingdom was in chaos, his family was divided, and his enemies were multiplying. By all accounts, he had every reason to break under the pressure. But instead, David grounds himself in what he still has: the unshakable presence of God. This is the lens you can use to begin reclaiming peace in your own life. Instead of allowing fear to fill the void created by loss, let gratitude remind you of the blessings you still hold, even if they feel small or insignificant. Take a moment now to reflect on this. What remains in your life that you can thank God for? Maybe it's not a perfect situation, but is there enough grace in it to remind you that He hasn't abandoned you? It could be the breath in your lungs, the strength to take another step, or even the promise that God's love is constant and unchanging. These moments of gratitude, however small they may seem, become seeds that grow into unshakable faith. Gratitude, when practiced consistently, also creates humility. It takes your focus off the idea that you must solve every problem on your own and places it back on God as your ultimate sustainer. David understood this deeply. His declaration of gratitude was an acknowledgement that his strength came not from within himself, but from above. In verse 8, he writes, "From the Lord comes deliverance." It's a powerful statement that encapsulates the essence of gratitude. David wasn't claiming victory through his own ability. He was thanking God in advance for deliverance he couldn't yet see. This shift in mindsets, surrendering the need to control the outcome and replacing it with thankfulness for God's sovereignty, is where true peace begins. Gratitude also has the power to restore your sense of purpose. When life feels heavy, it's all too easy to lose sight of why you're fighting in the first place. Problems become all-consuming, and the larger picture of God's plan can feel distant and unreachable. But when you begin to list the things you are grateful for, you slowly reclaim clarity. Each act of thanksgiving pulls the focus back to God's promises and realigns your priorities with His will. Gratitude isn't just about celebrating what God has done. It's about trusting what He will do, even if the path ahead feels uncertain. You might be wondering how to put this into practice when life feels overwhelming. Begin with something simple. Take a moment, wherever you are, to thank God for just one thing. Speak it aloud if you need to, clearly and intentionally. Lord, thank you for being with me right now. Let that act of gratitude settle in your heart, even if everything else in your life feels chaotic. Then, take a second moment to reflect on the ways God has carried you before. Gratitude grows when we look back and remember His faithfulness in the past. What battles has He already helped you overcome? What victories in your life bear His fingerprints? When you recall these moments, your ability to trust Him in the present becomes stronger. David shows us that gratitude isn't just about changing your perspective. It's about fortifying your spirit for the battles ahead. When you thank God as your shield, as your sustainer, and as your deliverer, that gratitude becomes a declaration of victory over fear. Gratitude silences the voice of doubt. It draws your focus away from the chaos and places it firmly on the God who is bigger than any challenge you face. In moments of weakness, remember this: gratitude is a weapon, and it's always within your reach. It's a decision you can make, no matter how heavy life feels, to turn your attention to God's presence and promises. David's life teaches us that even when the battle rages around you, even when the outcome is uncertain, gratitude will give you the clarity and strength to stand firm. It's not denial, it's defiance. It's faith in action. It's the choice to believe, as David did, that the one who shields you is also the one who will deliver you. Reflection and realignment. How Psalm 3 shapes your life practically. When you think about the challenges that weigh you down, the sleepless nights, the deep fears, the lingering questions about your future, where do you turn? Psalm 3 offers more than just poetic promises or spiritual encouragement. It's a blueprint. It shows us not only how to cry out to God in desperate moments, but how to realign our lives with His truth and practically apply that truth to the way we think, act, and live. The power of Psalm 3 lies in its simplicity. David, in the face of overwhelming circumstances, models 3 things we can all follow: honesty, trust, and declaration. He begins with complete honesty about his situation. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. David doesn't sugarcoat his reality or pretend things are fine. His words are raw and unfiltered, showing us that bringing our true emotions and struggles to God is not a sign of doubt, it's an act of faith. God doesn't ask us to suppress our feelings or mask our pain. Instead, He calls us to lay it all at His feet, trusting Him enough to hold what we're too weak to carry. This honesty is the first practical step Psalm 3 invites us to take. How often do we try to manage our struggles internally, hiding our fears even in prayer? How often do we package our words to God in ways that feel polite but keep our deepest concerns buried? Following David's example means coming to God as you are, not how you think you should be. It means speaking freely, whether through prayer, journaling, or simply sitting in His presence. This practice opens the door to real connection, real healing, and real solutions, all rooted in His power. The second layer of Psalm 3's practicality is trust. This psalm doesn't stop with David's fears, moves to his faith. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. Notice the contrast. David begins by listing his problems, but quickly shifts his focus to the promises of God. This transition isn't coincidental, it's deliberate. Through this shift, David teaches us that faith begins with where you choose to place your attention. Yes, life will bring setbacks. Yes, opposition will come. But if you stay fixated on the problem, you'll miss the presence of the solution. David's faith doesn't deny the battle, it reframes it under the authority of God. This act of trust can be woven into your daily life in practical ways. It starts with the discipline of redirecting your thoughts. Instead of replaying cycles of fear or negativity, interrupt them with affirmations of God's promises. You can even turn to Psalm 3 as a tool in these moments, reciting verses like, "I will not fear though tens of thousands assail me on every side." The act of speaking this truth out loud, if necessary, reinforces God's presence in your situation. Over time, this practice trains your mind to align itself with faith rather than fear. The third practical element of Psalm 3 is declaration. David boldly proclaims, "Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is on your people." These are not timid words. They are statements of victory, spoken before the battle is over. David understands that the outcome doesn't depend on his strength or strategy, depends on God's sovereignty. Does your life reflect that same level of declaration? Or are you waiting for circumstances to resolve before speaking words of victory over your situation? This doesn't mean we pretend everything is fine or deny the gravity of our struggles. It means we declare God's greatness even in the middle of our battles. When you begin to speak God's promises into your life, whether through prayer, worship, or simply repeating scripture, you realign your perspective with His purpose. It's not just self-motivation, it's a spiritual shift that redefines the way you approach every challenge. Beyond these three principles, honesty, trust, and declaration, Psalm 3 offers tangible ways to shape your spiritual habits. One of the most powerful is guided reflection. Start by creating intentional moments to reflect on God's shield around you. This might look like setting aside 5 minutes each morning to pray through Psalm 3, visualizing His protection as you prepare for your day. Think about the specific areas where you feel attacked, whether emotionally, mentally, or even physically, and imagine the Lord placing His shield over those exact areas. This act of reflection is not just calming, it's empowering. It reminds you that God is actively involved in your life, shielding you in ways you might not even recognize. Another habit you can cultivate is beginning or ending your day with gratitude. As modeled by David, even in the face of danger, David proclaims God as the lifter of his head, demonstrating a gratitude rooted in trust. Practically, this can look like journaling 3 things you're thankful for each day, no matter how small. Gratitude shifts your mindset and unleashes a quiet but profound spiritual strength. Finally, Psalm 3 reminds us of the importance of rest. David writes, "I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me." Rest here is not simply physical, it's a spiritual act of surrender. By resting, David declares his trust in God's ability to sustain him, even when enemies surround him. How often do we fight rest, burdened by the illusion that worrying or overworking will solve our problems? Psalm 3 offers a countercultural truth. Rest is an act of faith. Take intentional moments to pause, breathe, and lean into the assurance that God is in control. This psalm isn't just poetry, it's a tool for everyday life. It teaches us how to move through difficult seasons with a combination of honesty, faith, and action. When life presses in on you, when the path ahead feels uncertain, Psalm 3 gives you a way to respond. Acknowledge your fears, but don't dwell on them. Trust in God's position as your shield and your sustainer. Declare His promises boldly, not because of what you can do, but because of what He has already done. Reflect, give thanks, and make room for rest. David's story and the psalm it produced remind us that victory is not about avoiding battles. It's about who you trust to fight them with you. Psalm 3 is your guide, not just for survival, but for thriving in the face of whatever life throws your way. It's a daily blueprint for living with purpose and peace, grounded in the unshakable power of God. Victory through faith and peace in God. Psalm 3 is more than an ancient cry for help. It is a living, breathing reminder that victory doesn't come from our strength, but from God's unfailing presence. It's a song of triumph sung in the middle of despair, a declaration of peace that transcends the chaos of life. David's words show us where real power lies, not in avoiding challenges, but in trusting God through every storm. As we close this journey through Psalm 3, let's reflect on how its message transforms not just our perspective, but the way we live. David's life was filled with battles, both external and internal. He faced betrayal from people he loved, opposition from enemies beyond count, and even the sting of his own failures. But Psalm 3 shows that for every battle, there was an abiding truth. God was with him. David didn't claim perfection, nor did he win every battle on his own terms. What set him apart was his unshakable belief in God as a shield around him, a source of glory, and the one who lifts his head. This faith didn't ensure a problem-free life, but it gave him the strength to rise every time he was knocked down. As you think about your own life, consider this. What battles are you facing right now that feel overwhelming? Maybe you're dealing with a personal failure, the loss of a relationship, or a season of uncertainty that clouds your every thought. Perhaps it feels like the walls are closing in, like every outcome leads to defeat, and you're left wondering where God is in the midst of it all. Psalm 3 answers those questions not with easy fixes, but with a profound promise. You are not alone, and the battle is not yours to fight alone. The beauty of David's prayer lies in its rawness and relevance. He doesn't deny the existence of pain or pretend that faith makes life easy. Instead, he confronts reality while anchoring himself in God's greater truth. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. These words echo the assurance that God hears, even when your cries feel unnoticed. In God's character, there is no delay or indifference. He's fully present, fully aware, and fully invested in your rescue. But rescue doesn't always look the way we expect. Sometimes victory is immediate, a prayer answered decisively, a situation resolved quickly. More often, however, victory comes in stages, through endurance, trust, and peace that defies understanding. Psalm 3 reminds us that deliverance is not always about changing our circumstances. Sometimes it's about changing us. Peace begins when we stop focusing on the size of the problem and start focusing on the certainty of God's presence. The battle may not end overnight, but the shift in your heart, your mindset, and your spirit marks a victory even the fiercest enemy cannot take from you. Psalm 3 also teaches us that peace and victory are deeply intertwined. David writes, "I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me." That simple act of rest in the midst of chaos is itself an act of defiance against fear. It's proof that trusting God allows you to experience peace before the battle is even resolved. Peace doesn't mean the absence of conflict. It means the presence of God within that conflict. True victory is not just about winning the external fight. It's about overcoming the internal battle of fear, doubt, and despair. Imagine if you approached your own challenges this way. What if, instead of carrying the weight of uncertainty, you handed it over to God and allowed yourself to rest? What if, instead of repeating doubts in your mind, you recited His promises? David didn't need to have all the answers to find peace. He only needed to know that God was sustaining him. That same truth applies to your life today. God's sustaining power is not tied to your ability to fix everything. It's tied to His nature, His love, and His unfailing commitment to walk with you through every storm. The Psalm's closing verse, "From the Lord comes deliverance. May your blessing be on your people," is both an acknowledgement and a call to faith. Deliverance isn't something you have to orchestrate. It comes from the Lord. No matter how complicated your situation, no matter how heavy your burden, God offers rescue. His plans are not limited by your circumstances, and His blessings are not contingent on your performance. David's confidence in God's deliverance wasn't rooted in perfect conditions. It was rooted in his understanding of who God is: a shield, a defender, a lifter of heads. This closing also reminds us that the blessings of God extend beyond us as individuals. David doesn't just pray for himself. He prays for all of God's people. This is the beauty of faith that connects us, reminding us that we are not just recipients of God's promises, but participants in His greater plan. Your victory, your peace, your resilience sits all part of a larger story, one that reflects God's glory and touches the lives of others. When God lifts your head, it's not just for your benefit. It's so you can lift the heads of others, sharing His hope and reminding them of the same truths you've discovered. So, what now? How does Psalm 3 move from the pages of Scripture into the reality of your life? It begins with a choice to cry out to God honestly, to trust Him fully, and to declare His truth boldly. It begins with choosing gratitude over despair, prayer over panic, and hope over doubt. None of this happens by accident. It's a daily decision to anchor yourself in God's promises, just as David did. As you face your own battles, remember this: God is your shield, surrounding you even when you feel exposed. He is your glory, restoring your identity even when the world tries to tear you down. And He is the lifter of your head, reminding you of your worth, your purpose, and His unfailing love for you. Victory doesn't come from avoiding struggles. It comes from facing them with the assurance that God is on your side. Let Psalm 3 be your battle cry, your prayer, and your guide. Whatever challenges lie ahead, walk into them with the same confidence David had, the confidence that the God who shields you, sustains you, and delivers you will never leave you. That is where true peace and victory are found, not in the absence of problems, but in the unshakable presence of the One who carries you through them. Whenever you need strength, return to Psalm 3. Speak its words over your life. Let it remind you that you are never alone, that the battle belongs to the Lord, and that His peace will carry you even in the midst of life's storms. Victory through faith, peace in God, this is the promise for David and for you.